Hey everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge Exchange podcast. I am your host, Daniel Arbilla, lead mentor at the Knowledge Exchange, where we help clinicians apply a BPS approach to their clinical practice. We've got some new revamped online courses, so check it all out at tkex.org and keep up to date as well on our discussion group on Facebook. So today we are continuing with our Misinformation series, and who better than Geoff Ford and Andrew Wild, two legends on TikTok and Instagram, who I've been following for a while, and they are very close role models of mine. They've been busting out the content and busting out the myths and the misconceptions and the online BS. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to discuss how clinicians can handle, respond, and react to misinformation, what we can do for the benefit of the people that we help. So Andrew, Geoff, thank you both for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Looking forward to it.
So I'll start with you, Geoff. Tell us a little bit of an intro. What do you do and what's your why?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Dan. So I'm a physio practicing up on the Sunny Coast. Got my own little business, Be Strong Physio at Moffat Beach, which is an awesome spot. My why really is, especially for the business, is helping people. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I'll give you a bit of background. I dilly-dallied around. I tried various degrees at uni, ended up graduating with law of all things. Started working in law, hated it, was miserable. I was working in corporate law, basically it was the construction of major projects. And it was just, it was mind-numbing stuff. So then went on a bit of a journey of self-discovery, did a couple of snow seasons, ended up working like cleaning toilets in a ski resort. And I thought, I love this, like not having someone watching over me, just having autonomy over my time, being able to go out and ride when I wanted to, but I still needed to have something else. And long story short, I ended up going and getting some career transitioning advice, which is something that was paid for by a company. And they did a bunch of like psych testing and stuff and said, look, you need to be doing something where you're helping people. You obviously love doing exercise, that sort of side of things, because I was a yoga teacher at the time. And anyway, bit the bullet, went back and did a physio degree. It was something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to go back and study again, but went over to Curtin in Perth because it was the only place in Australia where you can do the graduate entry masters, not having done health sciences undergrad. So I thought, that's it. I'm going to try and knock off a year if I'm going to go back. And so went over there and did that. Came back over east and started working at Brizzy, migrated up the Sunny Coast, and eventually started my own little practice.
Love it. What a journey. Wow. Yeah. And Be Strong Physio, loving the kind of ethos and the values that you portray. What kind of clientele do you tend to see at the moment?
It's pretty varied. It's more general pop than athletes, which I personally enjoy. Where I was working previously, we did get quite a few sort of swimming athletes and stuff in. And I just love seeing the change in people that maybe haven't done any strength training or they're keen to do some of that sort of stuff. They've always been a bit too scared of it, or they're worried about injuries, that sort of stuff. So that's ideally the type of people that I love to work with. I probably see a good mix, like what you were saying, Andrew, before we got going. I see a good mix of people who, you come in with pain, but also get a few people come almost weekly for training sessions and stuff. So it's not all your classic sort of physio stuff. It's lots of strength training, like a variety of movement stuff. So I'm pretty fortunate to do that.
That's awesome. And that's why we start with a bit of we've been diving into like our roles as clinicians and how that can be quite flexible, diving into more of the fitness and personal training role. And Andrew, a bit keen to hear a little bit more of what you do and your why.
Yeah, so I'm a physiotherapist and strength and conditioning coach, and I own and run a business called Wild Physio Fitness in Neutral Bay in Sydney. Look, my why, I was injured a lot as an adolescent, so I decided to become a physio because I was always at the physio. So as a 16-year-old, I had stress fractures in my back for 3 years running, and it affected the fact I couldn't play sport. I wanted to play sport. I was always off the park, rehabbing, going to the physio. So it was really a frustrating few years for me. Got through cricket seasons, but Aussie rules, I was constantly in and out. So that was kind of the reason why I became a physio, because I just seen so much of the physio world in those few years. And then started physio as an undergrad, finished it, worked in up to 11 jobs actually before I opened up Wild Physio Fitness. So I had different jobs in sport and different clinics, and I worked in Wagga, Sydney, Brisbane, back in Sydney. So I've kind of moved around a bit. And then Wild Physio Fitness opened up 5 years ago, initially online, and then I opened up face-to-face services 3.5 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing. So both of you have quite varied careers and coming up to now, so really interesting. And I'm keen to dive into your experiences, maybe of some of the misinformation that you've come across during your journeys, even from before physio. So if we were to start with maybe some examples, and I know you both are across the online space much more than I am in terms of what you see, what people comment, what you come across, what you scroll through, what you wish you hadn't scrolled by, or some of the BS that can get us quite frustrated as evidence-based clinicians. What might be some examples that you guys come across, and jump in whenever you'd like?
Geoff, you're the man. Go for it.
I guess like a lot of it originally came. I mean, it's pretty prevalent in the yoga space. So heaps and heaps of over cueing, and make sure you do this to protect your back, and engaging your core, engaging your glutes, not to overextend or hyperextend your lumbar. So I definitely got a bit of an intro to it there. And then I was lucky to go to Curtin, I think, because whilst a lot of the stuff was still quite outdated, we did heaps of electrotherapy modalities and stuff. But Peter O'Sullivan was sort of, in the background with all of his team. So we had a lot of that sort of BPS model coming through, and questioning some of the narratives around core stability and posture and those sorts of things. So I think that was a really fortunate sort of mistake that I actually chose to go over to Curtin and study there. And as soon as I started to hear some of that stuff challenging, and I was reading Greg Lehman's blog while I was at uni as well. Came across Adam Meekins. He was just starting out as I was still about to graduate, and I just got really passionate about the implications that we can have, or the impact we can have as we throw out these outdated narratives. It wasn't the fact, for me, it's not as important that they're right or wrong. It's the impact that we have on people. So those outdated narratives, because we get into these big battles about, oh well, what does the evidence say? Does it say this? Does it say that? For me, it's more about, okay, it's probably outdated, but what's the impact that you're then having on people? Is it a positive impact, or are you actually damaging people and having this thing lasting with them for years? So in terms of specific examples, I mean, they're everywhere. They're all of your big sort of quick fix sites. I don't want to name any of them necessarily, but there's so many examples, especially if you're diving into your Instagrams, your TikToks, etc. I'm not that present on TikTok, to be honest. It's more Instagram for me. But there's just because of the medium, it's all about quick messages. So then people are consuming these messages. It's like, what can I do? What's the 5 tips to fix back pain? How do I fix my posture? Those sorts of messages are just everywhere. So I sort of thought, I'm going to take it upon myself to start to try and take these on, rather than actually attacking the people. For me, it's more about trying to provide an alternate explanation.
Yeah, and looking at the effects that our beliefs or our narratives and perhaps some interventions or ways of practicing can have on people, and both positive and negative impacts.
Yeah, exactly, mate. I know I didn't really answer your question there, mate, but there's just so many.
I forgot the question, to be honest. Mate, it's more about like what you've seen, what you've come across, Andrew, in terms of misinformation over the years.
Yeah, so back when I had my issues 04 to 06 with my lower back, it was consistently cropping up, and I'm seeing different therapists, and they're focusing on core strengthening and switching on my TA and all this sort of dribble. And at the time, I thought, it didn't really make sense. You know, someone that was playing sport at a reasonably high level, I have to lie on the bed and activate my TA, and this is going to make me feel better. It didn't make sense to me at the time. It was frustrating because I thought I'm wasting my parents' money, I'm wasting time. And it took a while for me to find a practitioner that was evidence-based, that understood that I was a kid that was, for context, I was a rover. I was very small originally until I was about 16, and then I shot up. Now I'm 6'3", and I was very, very tall, very skinny, and I needed to get in the gym. Like, it was pretty simple. I just needed to get in the gym and build some strength. All the bones had grown really quickly and all the muscle tendon units had to catch up, and I was struggling. So the fact, and looking back on it now, I just think I'm tearing my hair out thinking, you know, if I had an evidence-based practitioner that I found when I was 16, things would have worked out differently. So those narratives around core strengthening and everything were around then. And then I went to university, and we're getting taught these other same things at university. You know, you need to switch on your TA, and we learn about EPAs. And I'm just, the whole time in those first few years, some of the subjects we were getting taught, I just thought, this is bullshit. You know, an EPA, why are we learning about EPAs? We haven't even touched the gym yet. And we're lying on our backs, switching on our TA, and they're using ultrasound to see whether we can switch on our multifidus and our transverse abdominis. And it just made no sense to me that we're learning about this. And so they were pretty much, that was the start for me. And that was one of the reasons why I became very passionate about evidence-based practice early on in my career. And I kind of just wanted to debunk some of the bullshit out there, to be honest, because I just know that the profession needs to be better.
Absolutely. And it affected you personally in terms of your
100%.
athletic kind of career and your identity and all your meaningful activities. So yeah, why not? Let's do something about it. And I see the parallels where maybe university teaches a few outdated practices. And what I've heard is that it's kind of what the market wants, that clinic owners or businesses, they have these electrophysical agents, and we're talking about musculoskeletal kind of private practice settings. What would you say to response? And I know, Andrew, you've had an experience with new grads, and what maybe clinic owners can say instead in terms of what they want, what's the demand, what does the market want?
Yeah, I just don't understand what the universities are doing when there's clearly evidence that suggests that something that they're teaching is irrelevant. You know, back in 2008, when I started physio, we're still learning about transversus abdominis, we're still learning EPAs and these things. And we had research before and around that time that was debunking these concepts. And, you know, they talk about, obviously, with research, it takes up to 15 to 17 years before it's in clinical practice, but we should be better than that. And universities need to have less red tape so they can open the courses up to change. Otherwise, they're just behind the times. And, you know, I've even heard stories of clinicians struggling in those first 5 years to find an identity. And I was the same. That first 5 years, struggling to find an identity because there was a lack of strength and conditioning focus at clinics. And it was very much around manual therapy. How many times are you seeing this client? You need to get them back more often. It's a system of, you need to see them 3 times in the first week and 2 in the next 2. And it made no sense to me, and I hated it. And I knew that I wanted to do my own thing to buck the trend. And I'm not very agreeable, so I need to work for myself.
The perfect storm for setting up your own business. Geoff, keen to hear your experiences, maybe even as a new grad, and you had already experienced perhaps some conflicting evidence.
Yeah. Look, I finished in 2016, and we were still being taught the same stuff, and we were still, like, every semester had EPA, so electrophysical agents, whatever it stands for. What's your ultrasound, TENS machines and stuff. And it just, like, as we were going through, they're like, yeah, there's not really any evidence to support this, but here it is. And you're just thinking, like, why why are we wasting so much time on this? And for me as well, I knew I didn't want to do cardio and neuro, which are two big elements of physio, which is, there's some helpful elements to it. But the whole time I'm going through, I'm like, hey, I know what I want to do with this. And I feel like most of my degree at the moment is not really helping me get to where I want to get to. So definitely similar sort of frustrations. And I, coming from, playing sport previously and then getting into yoga teaching, which is what inspired me to get into physio, because I saw the physical changes you had on people, psychological changes and stuff. And I really wanted to dive into the exercise side of things more so. And we did one proper subject on exercise. We did learning to tilt your pelvis and stuff. But yeah, the detail around the exercise stuff is just not there. And even if, obviously exercise isn't the magic fix for everything either, but I do feel like we need to be competent in prescribing exercises at the appropriate intensity, volume, etc. And I just don't think that's there. So that was a really similar frustration of mine.
Yeah, they just need to trim the fat. It's pretty simple. Get rid of the bullshit. Get rid of the EPAs. Get rid of the fluff. Focus more on the S&C. And then the other thing is they should have a block on communication. That is huge. There's clinicians coming out after they finish university and they don't have the communication skills that are adequate enough for private practice. And that's no fault of their own. That's literally, they haven't had experience. They haven't had exposure to this. And I talked about this on the Athletes Authority podcast. Often private practice placements are luck of the draw. You can literally have a shocker, or you can have a good one where you can see no clients at all yourself, and some other ones you literally do everything, or you just stand in the corner by yourself watching the whole time. So it's a luck of the draw, and you may or may not get exposed to good practice, and also you just won't see enough clients in your uni degree to be competent. And you're not competent no matter what. You need to it takes a fair few months and years to get competent with communication, but you could get better at communication if there was blocks at university.
Definitely. Agree. Yeah, 1000%, mate. I think communication, I was lucky not being a new grad, having gone to, through law and stuff, and communication is huge in law. So I was really fortunate to have that, but I think it's the most important thing to do. Absolutely.
Yeah,
agreed.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to improve when it comes to getting ready for practicing with patients, with clients in private practice settings. I'm curious then, what kind of skills or competencies, you mentioned S&C, kind of knowledge and experience working with humans, communication skills. If we were to create our own maybe university course, or have maybe some recommendations for new grads, clinicians listening, on maybe even having the communication skills to work with some of the misinformation from clients that they've had from their own previous healthcare professionals, that's coming to my mind. What other, if you were to design your own kind of new grad course, what would that include?
Yeah.
Passing it on to Geoff each time.
Good question, Daniel. I think, for me, as we've already been over, communication would be number one. It's part of communication, but learning how to handle communicating with other professionals, and especially when information from those professionals might conflict with what you're trying to tell these people. Because I know that's one of your questions that you want to ask. But for me, that's one of the hardest things, is when they've received messages from other professionals saying that, they go against everything you're trying to get them to do. And that for me is one of the hardest things that we do as physios. We definitely still need the manual handling, that's the wrong word, but the manual therapy, I guess, skills, but more for me for the assessment side of things. Obviously, whether you then use manual therapy as a treatment is probably is a little bit more up to the individual, but I definitely think you need to have the patient handling side skills down, and the ability to to convey confidence with that as well, which is difficult, especially when you're first coming out. But you do need to be able to do that because people expect it, and to really get a sense for, you know, how painful and sensitized people are. Sometimes you do need to actually sort of be able to poke a bit of, you know, do a bit of massage, do a bit of poking, prodding, that sort of stuff, just to see where they're at. So I think those skills are still really, really important. And off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. Andrew, over to you, mate.
No, love that.
I think at university, they do a good job of anatomy and physiology, pharmacology, all of the basics. I think they do a really good job there. And then they just miss the mark with the practical side of things. So I think they need to be better when it comes to learning how to communicate, as Geoff was saying, having more units during your degree where you're put under the pump with communication and understanding how to get your point across, also deal with misinformation and how to actually sort of work your way through debunking that misinformation. I think that's important. There has to be the S&C focused blocks, and whether that be something where it's an elective. You know, Geoff and I sound like we were similar. The fact that we both wanted to do pretty much private practice musculoskeletal sports physio. So we should have had the opportunity to do more work in the gym, more of the sports physio, musk physio, and whether you have an elective with that. And then there are other electives for, say, neuro and cardio and stuff if you want to go down that route. So, but I think as a whole, I think maybe 70%, maybe 65% of the degree is okay. And then they need to tweak the rest of it and get rid, trim the fat and just focus on a bit more S&C and the communication. And they could probably brush up on a little bit of the pain education stuff as well, potentially, depending on the university, because I've had 3 new grads on my podcast last year, and some of them said that the pain education stuff now is really good, but when I went through, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, totally agree. And if we were to also expand on the placements as well, I can share from my own experiences and from other new grads I talk to. Like you mentioned, Andrew, it is luck of the draw, and clinicians can be quite underprepared at the start, and then maybe just underprepared and confused when they're entering a clinic that maybe focuses too much on certain business values and not so much on person-centered practice, and then they can be quite lost as to what it is a physio is, what it is we do, whether it's physio, osteo, chiro, EP, and we need to give them some guidance, I think. I was curious if you guys wanted to share experiences when it comes to what you've heard from new grads, from colleagues, with maybe placements, or even sharing your own placement experiences.
Yeah, so I was really lucky with my placements. I had 3 really good placements. Technically, we had 2 musculoskeletal sports sort of placements in our last sort of 18 months. I tweaked my peds one so I could do it at a private practice, and just I made sure I saw one kid, I suppose, under the age of 16 each week. And I did it at the clinic where I actually started working the year after. So I had a really good base already. So I was blessed, but there were a lot of shocking experiences that people had where they literally didn't see one client at all the whole time. They were always standing in the corner of the room just watching. They were never put under the pump with an initial assessment or anything like that. So it was just literally observing, and that's just not good enough. It's a tricky one though. It's hard because a lot of clinics may take on a student and patients just don't want to see a student, or there's obviously the legality side of things as well. It's a tricky one, and I feel for the unis in regards to placements, because it's tricky. And also there's so many kids now coming out of university. There's only so many places they can do a placement, and you've got to have the right systems in place to take on a student. So it's a really tricky one. But look, personally, I was blessed, and it set me up really well to then start work the following year. I don't know what your experience was, Geoff.
Yeah, mine was quite different. I had, I don't know if it's the same as the undergrad with the graduate entry masters, but we just did, we did 1 4-week block for mask. And mine was in an awesome spot. It was down in Margaret River, so I chose the location more than anything. But the physio was in his 70s, I think. So he was a lovely guy, but his ability to stay up to date with physio was a little wanting. And we didn't really it was me and other girls were there, and it was just a bit of a shambles, to be honest. Like, we didn't really learn anything. There's so many outdated narratives involved in what he did. It was mostly passive treatments, trying to get people back regularly. But I think I was lucky enough to sort of understand that maybe that was more of a result of him not staying up to date than necessarily a reflection on the whole industry. And I think for me, it was having that, also starting to listen to podcasts and reading blogs and stuff like that. And I think, students these days have so many good opportunities to get an appreciation for what sort of updated therapists might practice like, that I think that's awesome. And, you're never gonna negate the fact that there will be some practitioners out there who are outdated. And probably what you were saying, Andrew, I don't have the systems available at the moment to have students, come on with me. And it's probably the bigger practices in general that do. And you could probably make an argument that some of the practitioners in those bigger practices may not necessarily be as up to date as well. So I think that's going to probably always be a little bit of an issue, that you're going to get variable placements. But if people can have, access to these resources where they know that not all therapists are like that, hopefully that would be helpful.
I think another thing about the degree, and when you come out, a lot of people get disillusioned with the degree being a health practitioner when there is a focus on manual therapy. I think the degree, because the enter score to get into physio or any type of health degree is quite high, you attract the wrong people. I think, yes, you need to be intelligent. You need to be smart enough to remember a lot of stuff. You need to be personable. You need to be empathetic. But do you need to get 95 in your HSC? No, you don't. The problem is a lot of people are doing it that probably aren't the right candidate to do physio. And then they get disillusioned as they come out, when they realize that a lot of it is just talking to people. You need to be very, very personable. And that's one of the reasons why some physios and other health practitioners go into research, because they don't like the personal side of things, and it's taxing. It's very taxing mentally to consistently talk to people over and over again and deal with problems and come up with solutions. So I think that's something that needs to change as well. But the reality is it's supply and demand. People want to do physio, so they need to keep the score high. So I think that's another factor, because, I got disillusioned with the profession as well. And I thought about going and doing something different before I realized, oh no, hang on, I can be the type of practitioner I want to be. I want to be a strength and conditioning coach and physio, and merge the fields and create that hybrid model. And I can go and do my own thing. Prior to that, being at clinics where it's built more of a churn and burn, I got so disillusioned. I was like, I'm trying my best to be evidence-based. I'm trying my best to focus on S&C, but I'm getting pressure with KPIs and getting pressure seeing clients more regularly to make sure the business is functioning well. It just really irked me, and it frustrated me. So I think that's something that needs to potentially change, and people need to realize that physio as a job isn't the easiest. It's mentally taxing. It's not physically taxing. It should be mentally taxing, and your hands shouldn't hurt at the end of the week.
That's interesting. It's like, I'm also gonna highlight that I'm an EP, so I guess for a blessing or a curse, I don't necessarily get the same expectations that patients can have. And on that note, I can kind of empathize with maybe clinic owners and clinic systems that built their business around that kind of service and that expectation. So I imagine it can be quite difficult for new grads to see that there might be some other possibilities, and we can kind of shift our roles. And I like that we can, maybe if our hands are more tired than our minds at the end of the day, maybe we need to check in, is this kind of the pathway that we want? Is this kind of the way that we'd like to to practice. And on that note, if you wanted to expand.
Yeah, just one thing. I think it's a blessing, because there's nothing worse than when you're at a party and someone realizes you're a physio and they're like, oh, you must give good massages. And you're just like, what the fuck? Is that what people think physios do? We're just literally giving out massages all the time. And people refer to physios as glorified masseuses. And I'm like, you have no idea what we do. We're a primary healthcare practitioner. And the amount of hands-on stuff, especially I do, and probably Geoff is the same, is minute. I don't do much at all. And it's so frustrating that that is the narrative around physios, that we're good with our hands and we give good massages. You know, that needs to change in itself. And, you know, it's easier said than done. And I think it is changing in time. But that's something that it's nothing worse when people say that at a party. I want to just go and walk away and speak to someone else.
I got the kind of, you're just an aerobics instructor as an EP kind of joke.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. If you were advising a new grad who mentioned that they're getting pumped in their first clinic, doing lots and lots of hands-on because it aligns with KPIs, they're a little bit confused that they're not really practicing the way that they want. What are some kind of possible solutions, piece of advice for them if they want to practice in a different way? And I add a precursor that manual therapy is not the devil, and we're not saying that it's horrible. We're just saying, hey, maybe there's ways that we can expand our roles as healthcare professionals for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I think it's good if you've got a boss that is more, you know, manual therapy based and doesn't really do much of the exercise stuff. It's more like a throwaway at the end. It might be worthwhile trying to open up a conversation about it and say, hey, look, I understand this is how you practice. You know, are you open to me changing things up a little bit? And as long as, you know, the boss is probably going to be happy as long as the numbers are being met to some extent. But you could also make the argument that maybe the KPIs aren't going to be met doing that maybe you're not going to see people as many times, but maybe as word gets around, you're going to get more people coming and seeing you. But yeah, it can be tricky. I mean, that's what ultimately led to me starting Be Strong is my previous boss essentially said to me that I needed to put my hands on every single person, tell them that they had a, you know, biomechanical reason, that they had pain, and that I had to fix it to some extent, loosen it up with my hands and see them a couple of times a week for at least the first couple of weeks. And I was just like, I'm out. So yeah, it's tricky. And I see it come up on the knowledge exchange quite a bit on Facebook is grads saying, hey, what do I do? Because my boss has told me this, he's not happy with how I'm, you know, practicing, etc. So, I mean, honestly, my advice, if you are in that situation, would be just get out, because it's probably, if you've opened up the conversation and he's not open to it, you're not going to be happy. And there are plenty of places where you can go where you will be happy. Come have a chat to Andrew, come have a chat to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've got to probably get out. If you're getting pressure to treat how you don't want to treat, and there's pressure for you to do manual therapy and it's all about KPIs, I think it's probably a toxic environment for someone that's evidence-based. And at the end of the day, you become a physio to help people. You don't become a physio to see a certain number of people per week. Every person that walks in your door, you should be able to try and get them better as quickly as possible. They should walk out empowered. They should not walk out feeling like they've got issues or they're depressed about their body and the fact that they think now that they've got a biomechanical problem or they're going to have this forever or whatever. I think, find another job. Go and set up your own business. Have a side hustle. You know, speak to Geoff and I about potentially starting your own business, because like it's tough. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's very rewarding and you can treat how you want to treat. And one thing as well, I would say, because when you do take the route Geoff and I have taken, it often takes a bit more time to probably go through what we're trying to go through with the pain education, and we're going through obviously the S&C stuff, often you need more time. So that's why I do an hour initial, and that's why I often do 45-minute follow-ups. And if, say for instance, my new employee needed more time, I'd be fine with that. Go for it. I think there should be less of a focus on time pressures and more of a focus on just doing a bloody good job with clients, and then you'll get referrals from that. The other thing is, time is money. Charge more. If you've got an amazing model where you're allowing the client to get better as soon as possible, and you're all about maybe having less appointments, getting them better, evidence-based model, charge more, because people will come and see you if you're good. I think that's really important as well, rather than charging less and worrying about the bottom dollar and just chasing numbers all the time. Don't chase numbers. Get people better and do it for the right reasons. I think that's important.
100%. And if you're helping people, they're not going to be worried about $10, $20, $50 difference at the end of the day. If they're getting better, like especially if they've got persistent pain or a significant injury, they're going to pay a little bit more money to see someone who's going to help them get better, rather than, shop around to get the cheapest price as well. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
And the manual therapy, the effects that you get are just so poor, but the cost is so high. You go and get a massage for half an hour and you spend $90 or $100, or it even might be more here in Sydney. And the effects that you're getting are pretty shit compared to what you could get if you just went and saw an evidence-based practitioner that set you up with a plan for you to manage it long term.
But if you want a massage, I always go and see someone who's trained in massage. Like, don't come and see me.
Well, the other thing that I would say there is, because it's so unskilled, and people hate me saying that, it is. Massage is unskilled, and you don't need to be skilled to get the same result. Do it yourself at home, and you can make adjustments at home, or even get your partner or your friend or your kids to walk over your back. You're going to get similar effects with the diffuse noxious inhibitory control, with the pain cycles, and how we can modulate pain. You can get a similar result at home and not spend a cent.
Yep. Maybe the one context where a Theragun actually makes a lot of sense financially. Yeah, I think having that opportunity to allow people to reflect on the results and what they want, what their goals are, and looking at the long-term picture. And then also maybe shaping the way that we market our services. Noticing Be Strong Physio, it's got strong in the name. Wild Physio Fitness, it's got fitness in the name. So just some considerations for business owners and maybe even new grads, clinicians, if they're looking for a place, maybe look at the marketing, because that's the way that that's what people are going to expect before they've even said hi. Wanted to pivot as well. Sorry to interrupt, Geoff. Well, not really, it's my podcast. But wanted to talk about the mixed messages, and then we'll dive into a bit of the online misinformation. If I can recall a story where I was writing something on the board in terms of like, you don't need as many cues as you think, and like we were going through some with clients, some deadlifts, and I think I said like lift it, or like just push the floor away, or something simple. And it's common, and I hear these stories where sometimes just a few meters away in another treatment room, someone's getting hammered with 28 cues at a time for maybe a glute bridge. So it can be quite, I'm just imagining myself as the client in that situation, and I'm not trying to say that was helpful or unhelpful or right or wrong, but it can be quite confusing to navigate like mixed methodologies, philosophies, we'll say, when it comes to practicing. How can we kind of navigate those mixed messages? And even if it's from outside the clinic with referral networks, you get the typical GP visit that says, this person needs core strength for their low back pain of 10 years. How can we, what would you say, navigate these mixed messages in clinic?
Yeah, it's really tricky, and it comes down to the individual in front of you a lot, I think. But for me, I think the first step has to be building trust, because if you just go, that chiro or that physio or that doctor that you've been seeing for the last 10 years, once a week, every week, is wrong, then they're going to go, hang on, like instantly they're on the defense. They've been paying good money. They've got a good relationship with them. So you've got to build trust first. And then I feel like you need to see whether they're actually open to being, or to some discussions around changing their minds and alternate explanations, alternate narratives. Because some people just don't care. They're just like, mate, I know, whatever, just fix me, I'm out of here. But some people are definitely open to it. And then for me, one of the sort of, I think the most effective ways is to start to get them questioning whether it's beneficial. And I had a girl in yesterday who was trying to deadlift, and she was like, all right, so I squeezed my core. It was while she's still standing. Then she tried to hinge over. It was so complicated. And I said, okay, just stand over the top of the kettlebell, bend over, pick it up. And I said, which one felt easier? Did you get any pain? And just go through questioning, give them active demonstrations, questioning, whether the previous narratives are actually helpful. And you can do it on a long-term approach too. You've been told to squeeze your core for the last 10 years, you've still got back pain. How effective do you think that has been? Has it been beneficial? And just get them starting to question themselves rather than flat out saying, hey, everything you've been told is wrong.
I love that, building rapport first. So not just like negating, and also it's not their fault that they've been given that narrative. I think that's important to need to like validate, like, it's not your fault that you've been told this. You've been doing everything that you've been told to do. And then I wonder, with that kind of experiential learning, curiosity, movement experiments, whatever you want to call it, I think if maybe some clinicians could also go through that process. I know me personally, I really benefited from training, from experimenting, from the embodied practice of doing a deadlift without any cues and experiencing it myself. I think those 2 points is what I heard, Geoff.
100%. And just because you got me thinking about it, also making it really clear that other therapist or that doctor is not malicious. They're not trying to give you outdated information. The evidence in this area has changed a lot when you think about it. And just empathizing with them, saying, look, when they went through in the 90s or this time, this is the stuff they were taught, and they are genuinely out there trying to help you. But has that helped, and start to open up that sort of conversation? So making it really clear that they're not malicious.
Yeah, I agree. You can't go in too hard. That's for sure. You need to softly do it. And I can be too blunt sometimes, but at the same time, you can sort of slowly massage that into the conversation. That's the only massage I'll do. But the other thing is, when it comes to with other practitioners or a doctor, you can try and approach that in the same way. You have to slowly get that point across. And if they don't want to bar of it, well, and they don't want to change their mind, so be it. You're just trying to help. But if they have outdated beliefs and they don't want to change, well, that's their problem. But you don't want to necessarily just be putting everyone offside and ripping shreds off people just because they have outdated beliefs.
I love that. I don't think we can't reach everyone in the entire world. We can only reach a certain number of people within our niches. And I think this can segue into social media when it comes to a lot of the BS that's out there. With respect to engagement, I think controversial posts and black or white thinking and simple quick fixes get all the views. What's some advice that you would give for us clinicians, how we can respond and react in helpful ways?
Yeah, it's tricky because, as you said, controversial things that aren't necessarily correct often get more views. And Alexis has mentioned that before on my podcast. They've done studies on this where something that is actually misinformation will often get more traction. So it's hard in a way to get your point across. I think if you do see something online, flagging it, maybe sending it to Geoff and I or Alexis.
You guys are like the army, the police. It's like report.
But I think you should have to there should be frameworks behind what you can and can't post. You can't just post outdated bullshit beliefs and get away with it that's affecting people's health. I think, this isn't us, posting things about baking. We're having an influence on people's health here. So we need to be careful what we say, and we should be, all of us should be using evidence-based practice, in my opinion, to get a point across. Because if you're not, you're just throwing darts at a dartboard and you're kind of blind to it. You're not really achieving the result that we all should be. So I don't know. I find it difficult because I think I want to tear shreds off people that are posting this bullshit, but at the same time, I don't want to come across too negative. So it's a real tricky one. I think Alexis does a good job of it. He's often a bit too brutal in some ways, but at the same time, if you're trying to get your point across and asking that clinician to maybe open up your viewpoints and think, all right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I should read some more research. If you've tried that enough, well, I think it's go for it. Geoff, You're better at this than me, mate, I think.
Oh, no. But what I try to do is, rather than take down people, I sort of thought who do I want to reach with my messages? And I think for me, it's helping people who are in pain or have received these negative messages. So rather than going after the big university websites and stuff that are putting out this information, which other people are doing a really good job of, like Alexis is all over that. And I think it's important work. But for me, I wanted to help the people who are actually in pain. And I thought, I'm going to start creating my own content and putting out those alternate explanations, those alternate narratives, and trying to get people questioning themselves if the narratives that they're hearing elsewhere are actually helpful. And it's difficult because, as you've both alluded to, you need to have controversial posts to get out there in the first place. So I still feel like there is room for a bit of controversy if you're going to be evidence-based. And because the popular messages are so unevidence-based, that if you say something against them, like, hey, maybe, posture isn't important, or, stabilizing your core is not necessary, then all of a sudden that is a little bit controversial. So, whilst you don't quite have the nuance that you'd probably like to, I feel like you've got to have your message suiting the medium. Like if you're trying to get reels out, for instance, if you've got this big, long, texty post with all the nuance in it, it's just not going to get seen. So you might have to compromise a little bit on that side of things just to get it out there. And it's a bad analogy, but thinking of like throwing out some bait to try and get people in, and then your posts are where you might have a bit more information and where you might explain things in a little bit more detail.
I think being positive as well is a really good way of doing it. I think you've done a great job, Geoff, of being positive and not being too negative. And even how I've seen you question some of the bigger accounts that have posted some pseudoscience or something that's not evidence-based. And rather than attacking, you've asked them, would you be open to changing your opinion based on this, this, and this? And then I think that's a good way of doing it, rather than being like, you're an idiot. You don't read research. No, everyone else, please don't listen to this person. I think that's a good way of doing it, because then you put it back on them to potentially change and to be better, rather than just attack. I think I've definitely shifted my focus from being a little bit negative at times. I think I was a bit negative a few years ago in some of my posts, and maybe even on podcasts and stuff, but now I'm more positive, I feel. If, as you said, Geoff, if people have the right intentions and they're trying to help, if they have outdated beliefs, it might not necessarily be their fault. They just are behind the times a bit. But there are practitioners out there that do take people for a bit of a ride, in my opinion, when they do know that some of this stuff is bullshit or it's outdated, and then they use that as a business tool to get people coming back.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yes, it's got to assume positive intent. I think even if maybe there is some business intent in there, for us to be curious, I think is a lot more helpful than just attacking straight away. Or if we want to attack, just shift them off to just private message Alexis, the no bullshit physio, and he'll do the hard work for us, like an army of sorts. Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we've got some valuable info and content out there, and advice as well, speaking about private practice, how to handle perhaps some mixed messages out there, maybe a bit of inspiration for clinicians if they're looking to start their own business. So really happy that we had this discussion, and wanted to get all the listeners to hear more about you, and if people want to reach you, and anything coming up, any projects coming up for you. I'll start with you, Andrew, and then Geoff.
Yeah, so you can reach me on all socials at Wild Physio Fitness, website wildphysiofitness.au now, .com.au and .au. I bought that domain last week. And projects, nothing really in the pipeline at the moment. I've got 3 editors. Actually, I've got 3 editors currently editing my Your Body Bible Pro Edition ebook. So that's absolute beast of a thing now. It's I think it's about 80,000 words, all evidence-based content. So trying to get that out there and hopefully potentially get it published. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. So that's probably the project at the moment. And then I've got a new physio that I've employed, Nicholas Dang. So he's a great lad. He's very evidence-based. So he's looking forward to hooking right in. He started yesterday. So onwards and upwards.
Exciting. And also a shout out to your podcast. You've got some juicy topics coming up.
Yeah, Wild Physio podcast and my old podcast, Hybrid Therapist podcast. But yeah, I've got a couple of really good episodes coming out next week.
Amazing. And Geoff?
Awesome. Probably most active on Instagram, so Be Strong Physio, and Geoff Ford Physio on Facebook. I'm trying to do a lot of question and answer stuff on Instagram at the moment. So yeah, any physios or other health professionals listening to this who do have questions, hit me up on there, and I'll try and post the answers up on my stories so people can all follow along. Projects, nothing specific at this stage. I would love to have some sort of a podcast, but it's just a bit of a pipe dream at the moment. And probably later this year, I'm going to be hopefully getting another therapist on board. So if there's any young physios who are interested in living on the sunny coast, hit me up.
Get ready for the hundreds of DMs as soon as this podcast is released, mate. Exciting stuff. Thank you both, gentlemen, and loving the work that you're doing. Like I said, you are my personal role models, and it takes a lot of effort to do all the stuff that you do. So kudos, you're helping our entire industry. So keep up the great work. Very much looking forward to our next chat. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. Likewise, mate. Thanks, Andrew. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thanks, Daniel. It's been great. And likewise, look up to you as well. What you're doing with this is phenomenal. The Knowledge Exchange podcast is definitely something that I listen to regularly, and I think it's great what you're doing with your Instagram and everything too. So props to you.
Absolutely.